That's exactly kind of what I was grappling with in 2021 when we launched the first book and we were trying to figure out how do we market this. But I think some of the tactics, some of the ideas from B2B marketing and cybersecurity did translate over into the marketing of books. And one really clear example in my mind is email marketing, actually. So we're not doing lead nurturing and all that sort of thing, but just having a regular cadence of email newsletters, communications, and maybe you sign up for our newsletter and you get a welcome email or things of that nature that have really helped keep in touch with our subscribers and people interested in the series. Has been something that I've been running and really helps or has translated over into my experience in email marketing for a business B2B situation.
One Day Success Podcast. I'm Jonathan, and today I'm really excited. I have got Chris Spellman, who is the leading the demand generation at Sphere, and I'm really excited to learn more about what Chris is doing and hear his story. Chris, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for your time today. I'm truly grateful you're here. Can you start off by giving everybody that may not be as familiar with you just a little bit of an overview of who is Chris and maybe a little bit about what you're doing at Sphere?
Yeah, great. So I actually just started Sphere a few weeks ago, which is a cybersecurity software company. And I like to say that I'm a cybersecurity marketer by day and novelist and book marketer by night. I have about a decade, 12 years actually, I think, right at this point in B2B marketing experience, but 6 of those actually, the last 6 years have been in cybersecurity. So really focused there. And then besides that, my wife and I are co-authors of the Shadows of Freedom series, which is a trilogy of dystopian novels. And we're actually working on a second all new series as well that's going to be coming out in the next couple of years or so, a year or two. And but yeah, and then besides all of that, obviously supporting the marketing of the trilogy and the books through various means, newsletters and advertising and the whole 9 yards of that's marketing as well. So I have my hands in a lot of different things, but it's been fun.
I love it. And one of the things I'm really excited to chat with you about is actually your book series.
Yep.
We talk a lot of marketing on the podcast, and that's great, and I want to go there, but it's really unique that I can have a guest that actually is in marketing but has written a fiction series. And I'd love to know just a little bit more about that. Could you take a couple minutes and share with our audience a little bit about the series and what it's about, and maybe if they're interested, how do they get involved and learn more?
Yeah, sure. So In the Shadows of Freedom is the first novel in the Shadows of Freedom series, and essentially profiles a young artist who moves to New York City, is going to graduate school in art. It's all happening within this dystopian near future of the United States where there's a ruling party that is, I guess you could say, anarchist or social Darwinism rules the day, that sort of thing. Basically, the idea is that everything's about freedom, and it's freedom to an extreme, freedom that everyone can do whatever they want, however they want it. But the flip side of it is that those who disagree with the the regime are not free to do what they want because they're being oppressed. So that's a milieu. The National Citizens Party is the ruling party, and yeah, that's the milieu in which Amanda, who is our young artist, finds herself, and then it really takes her through a whole journey. She meets a young man who's a member of the party, who actually works for the party, and just goes from there in terms of their adventures and that sort of thing. Yeah, and then the next year, A Nation of Tyrants is the follow-up, which came out last year, and then actually August 15th of 2023, we are releasing the third one, which is called As Strong as Death. That's the trilogy, and then pretty easy to find us either on Amazon for any of those, or you can check out our website, which is spellmanbooks.com.
It sounds really interesting. I got to admit, I haven't read a lot of nonfiction or a lot of fiction in the last few years, probably the last decade. I seem to be booked up on, no pun intended, on nonfiction, but these sound really interesting. How, I guess, a little history, just anything you can share. How did you and your wife manage to decide to write a dystopian fiction series? The storyline sounds very intriguing, and you and I had shared some emails prior. I'm definitely intrigued by the books, but how did you come up with this, and what drew you into writing fiction?
Yeah, no, great question. So it's an interesting story that takes us back to the very beginning of our marriage, actually. So we were married in 2009 and went off for a honeymoon and then came back. And then I think it was like maybe 2 weeks after we arrived back from the honeymoon, we sat down and started writing a novel. For whatever reason, I don't know, maybe we're just young and no kids and just had extra time on our hands or whatever. But we started writing this novel, and it was not dystopian in the beginning. It was almost like a little bit like a superhero feel of like good versus evil and angels versus demons or that sort of thing. But over time, it really evolved into something that was more political, more dystopian, and involved more. I studied philosophy in college, and a lot of that was actually political philosophy. So I wanted to bring some ideas that I learned from those times or from my experience in college to bear in this novel in the series, and just basically change it from maybe a little bit of a superhero feel to much more of a dystopian feel. And like I mentioned, we have another series coming out or that we're working on, and that one's actually not really strictly dystopian. So we're playing around with different genres that we want to write, but that's the quick thumbnail of where we got to with it.
Thank you. I find it very intriguing and definitely interested in the books and love to hear that. Now, obviously, this is more of a business type podcast, and we talk a ton with marketers and that type of stuff. Talk to me, if you would, and share with our audience a bit, Chris, how is your marketing experience in the cybersecurity and other industries? How is that translated into marketing a book? I know one of the things that we often hear from people is, yeah, marketing is unique to everybody. And while there's some truth to that, I do think there are some universal marketing truths that apply across the board. Audience identification and what do they want and how are we gonna make their life better, things like that. From your perspective, how did you translate some of those skills that you had in marketing into marketing a book, which is very different, obviously, than cybersecurity?
Yeah, no, that's exactly kind of what I was grappling with in 2021 when we launched the first book and we were trying to figure out how do we market this. But I think some of the tactics, some of the ideas from B2B marketing and cybersecurity did translate over into the marketing of books. And yeah, one really clear example in my mind is email marketing, actually. So we're not doing lead nurturing and all that sort of thing, but just having a regular cadence of email newsletters, communications, and maybe you sign up for our newsletter and you get a welcome email or things of that nature that have really helped keep in touch with our subscribers and people interested in the series. Has been something that I've been running and really helps or has translated over into my experience in email marketing for a business B2B situation. And then I guess another one would be actually kind of what we're doing right now. So podcast interviews. This is very big right now in terms of for subject matter experts to market their businesses and in say the B2B space or even cybersecurity or anything like that I've been working on professionally. So we've been on a few podcasts such as this one, obviously, promoting our book and getting in touch with people that way and things like that. I think the third area is actually just advertising. We did have a small ad budget that we used to gather some email subscribers, and just the idea of the messaging, the copy, finding the audience in different places that may be most appropriate, finding, I don't know, like a website or a journal that people may be more interested in dystopian fiction or maybe more interested in genre has been something that we did some research on. And then we really just launched into creating some ads and building an audience, which I believe is around 1,400 subscribers within less than a year. It was great to build that up and then kind of reach out to people all over the world that way.
And that actually brings me to a question that I know a lot of our listeners struggle with. And that's, how do they build an email list? I know many business owners, entrepreneurs, sales professionals, they're wondering, where do I get started? I've been doing lots of things. Maybe they've even created some good presence online, but they don't have an email list. And I really think for any business or any sales professional, that's a really critical asset for them to have. Can you share a little bit from your experience in marketing? How would you recommend that somebody that doesn't have a great email list, maybe they've got 30 or 40 people, maybe they've got their clients, but they want to expand that. Where do they start and how do they build an email list from your perspective? What type of advice and guidance would you give them, Chris?
Yeah. So for that sort of thing, I would say I would lead with giving things away for free, and especially like information. And I don't mean necessarily like an ebook in exchange for an email address or something like that. That could be useful in some cases, but depends on the application, B2B to C. What we did was we would offer the first 4 chapters in exchange for subscribing essentially. And so it was like a little bit of a giveaway that way. And also obviously it helps people get interested, familiar with the work and that sort of thing. So I think something like that, but also just leading with expertise, especially say on social media. So if it's a B2B context, maybe that's LinkedIn, becoming someone that people really respect and post frequently there and just really get to have people see you as a subject matter expert in your field because you have a really unique point of view that other people maybe aren't all saying the same as you. And then because you've gotten your name out there, then people want to say, oh yeah, I want your newsletter, I want whatever. And it could be as simple as just every Saturday or every week or whatever day it is, we'll send out a really valuable newsletter. And something else that I found interesting in newsletters that I subscribe to, this is specifically for B2B, is that they just provide really interesting content like all in the emails. So it's not one sentence, click here, one sentence, click here, whatever. And you have to click all over the place to get the content. It's almost like a little magazine of information all in the same email. So I think just showing value, showing what they'll be getting if they do subscribe, having a little landing page, it just really explains what they'll be getting by giving you their email address, and you're not going to spam them. You're going to provide really value in their inbox, that sort of thing. I think people also are just uncomfortable, especially in B2B. Oh, if I give my email address, am I going to have sales development representatives or business development representatives be contacting me constantly and hounding me and stuff like that? So I think, again, making it clear to people that this is just in exchange for email, we're going to provide the value every week or however often it is in like some sort of newsletter, I think, especially.
No, I think that's great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's awesome. Let's transition a little bit into your professional career, your B2B marketing and sphere. Talk to us a little bit about, a lot of us are marketing services, and I'm assuming Sphere, I admit I don't know a ton about them, but I'm assuming it's probably a combination of services and maybe some hardware or software. Can you tell us a little bit as a B2B marketer, you mentioned it's a new position for you, how do you go about evaluating the marketing that's being done and then determining what changes or what updates maybe are needed to the campaigns to reach your target audiences?
Yeah. So at Sphere, we actually are, I would say, primarily a software company offering cybersecurity software, but we have our roots in services, specifically offering, not to get too technical, but identity access management is the space we're in. So it's like cleaning up big enterprises that have individuals who work for them, employees who don't have access, who have access to something that they shouldn't have access to. And how do we keep track of 100,000 employees in this big enterprise or whatever? So we typically have like bigger enterprise clients. But so it's a mix of both the software that helps them do that and then the services where we actually help them consulting directly. So that's what we do. But in terms of what we're starting to do, it's interesting because when I came into the company a few weeks ago, started there, we didn't really have a lot of inbound marketing type motion. It was much more like outbound sales, relatively big sales team, reach out to prospecting and all that sort of thing, which is great. We didn't really have a lot, like there were no ads running, not a lot of inbound stuff going on basically in marketing. I think the messaging was good and a number of things were pretty solid, but so it's really, in this case, really just instead of stopping things that are going on, it's more just starting them to begin with. And in some ways, I actually like that because sometimes you walk into a business where they've been doing something the same way forever, and it's maybe not the best way to do it. And if you challenge it, it's, oh, that's how we always did it, or that sort of thing. So I feel like in this case, it's a blank slate. And it's been great to be able to, we're going to be launching some LinkedIn ads relatively soon. We're going to launch some Google ads relatively soon. We have possibility of a podcast actually at some point and the things of that nature. So it's really just great to be able to start from scratch and just build from there.
Oh, very cool. How do you, and I think every business needs to do this. You mentioned that there's not a lot of inbound leads coming in, and obviously those are golden because those are so valuable. How does a business, from your perspective and a B2B marketer, what steps should a business be taking to develop that online presence and make sure that they are being seen wherever their audiences are? Obviously, it involves making sure you know who that audience is, that not everybody does. But
Right.
once you've identified that audience, what steps do you recommend a business take in order to, again, get in front of that audience where they're at online?
Yeah, I think it's really to see, like you said, where they hang out online, for example. So let's say you're selling to a B2C motion and the age bracket tells you that, oh, my audience is on Facebook, or it tells me that they're on Instagram or they're on TikTok or whatever. So I think the first step would be to figure out, okay, where is my audience actually spending time online? For B2B, for my company, it's probably LinkedIn more first and foremost. So like that's where we want to put our focus both on organic and also paid in our case. But if it's Facebook, it could be the same thing. So it's really, I think it's really about, as I said earlier, like having a point of view in the marketplace. And again, I guess this depends on if you're talking B2B or B2C or whatever, but I think it translates either way, is have a viewpoint and offering or something that seems unique and seems, it could even be almost a little contrarian from like the popular way of the people view things. And then you put that point of view out there through maybe short videos or clever posts on LinkedIn or on Facebook or TikTok or again, wherever the audience is. And then just have people have, I think if it rests on that point of view, it's great to do a lot of video content. And I think that is the way to go these days, but it has to be video content with a point of view that is going to resonate with the audience. And it's not simply just going to be fun videos or whatever that can get you so far. But I think it needs to be, again, something that is going to really, people are going to see the value in what you're doing and want to be a part of it, essentially.
Well, and I certainly think that applies everywhere. I totally am in agreement with you on video. I think it's a great place to be, but I do think that sometimes we miss the mark by thinking any video will do when we really need to focus. I love the word you used, resonate, with content that resonates with our audience, that is stuff they're interested in. It reminds me, this morning I was having a conversation with a peer, and I won't share necessarily which side who was on, but one of the arguments that was made was that nowadays, more important than even knowing where your audience is, just saying, I'm going to be on every platform and I'm going to put content out on every platform. The alternative opinion on that was, hey, understand your audience and focus first and foremost on those platforms where they're at. And then if there's time, energy, and money left, feel free to try to broaden that, but begin by focusing on those areas where your audience already is. From your experience in B2B marketing and that, and again, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer. The other gentleman I've talked to is very successful as well. What's your perspective on that? Is it better to identify an audience and begin your focus there, or to take a broader shotgun approach and try to hit as much of the market as possible from your perspective?
Yeah, I would definitely be in the camp of what I like to call stacking growth. I've heard it called that, I should say. And stacking growth really means that you really build on LinkedIn or on Facebook or on whatever channel you're talking about, Instagram. And that's like your anchor, and you get some traction, you show success, you prove things out, you get a cadence of what, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you're like on one channel and you do really well. And then from there, you can expand out to other channels. Or I feel like as if you spread yourself too thin, especially if it's just like one or two people doing all of this, a big enterprise, yes. If you have 100-person marketing team, then, I guess you could do all the channels and probably do them fairly well. But for most people and most businesses, it just makes sense to pick a channel that is where your audience really is primarily, and then just expand from there and see, okay, LinkedIn is doing well, so how about Facebook, or how about Twitter, or how about what are Threads? Now that's coming.
Sure. Yeah.
Again, it's just, I think when it comes to, we're just talking about social media here, but it could really be anything. If you're doing really well with podcasting and that's been hitting out of the park, can you do virtual events and maybe record those and put that as part of the podcast? Or could you do like anything that's related to what you're doing, just keep building it.
Oh, I think great advice, and definitely one I agree with. I've not heard the term stacking, but I like that, and it really fits with my perspective that you need to begin with the most likely spot that your prospects are going to be, and again, where that content that you're creating is going to resonate with them, and then obviously broaden that over time as you move on. One thing we didn't talk about in any of our pre-interview stuff at all, but I'd be really curious to get your perspective. I spend a lot of my time in the agency world. That's where I'm at. You're obviously in what I would call more the corporate marketing arena. And there's some differences between those two worlds. From your perspective, what do you see and where do you see the influence of artificial intelligence, things like ChatGPT and Bard and others like that? Where do you see those and how do you see those impacting corporate marketing as we move forward? Any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, I think two things. One is that I think it can be overblown. I think it's very revolutionary, very important, has far-reaching consequences. But I think some people think now we don't have to write anything anymore. Now we don't have to
Oh,
think
yeah.
anymore, or whatever. It'd be good at prompts and not good at producing content, which I think is a mistake, obviously. But yeah, I think that for certain things, Midjourney might be great for iterating some images for ads, or Bard or ChatGPT. Any of those might be good for getting an idea of copy for an ad or copy for something, even a blog post. But I just feel like the idea that people have, okay, now I'm going to have triple the blog posts, and they're all going to be artificially written, and et cetera. And I think you'll get okay content that way, especially if it's not really edited or looked at manually. And you can increase your volume with like blog posts, but is that really how you show that you're a subject matter expert and differentiate yourself? Because if everyone's doing that, it's basically gonna be the same result and same content, and you're not gonna rise above the noise.
No, I absolutely agree with you on that. It's more than just a content creation tool. I admit I love the AI, but I really see a lot of it being in the area of inspiration, especially when it comes to us as marketers.
Right.
Sometimes we get writer's block, or we're tired, or we get that 2 o'clock doldrums, and we're just not quite sure where to get started. And we need somebody to light a little spark and go, oh, that's a direction to go. And I think that can be really beneficial. I do think, like you mentioned, that I'll use a different phrase, but I think there's a lot of people out there that look at these AI tools and think, oh, I finally found my silver bullet. I found the easy button. And it really, I believe it's a tool or tools that can amplify what we're already good at, but it also can amplify what we're not good at. And I think people miss too often that as an amplification tool, if you're not already good at what you're doing, it's not going to necessarily magically create and make you an expert at something just because you typed a prompt into whatever tool and asked it to tell you about a particular topic. I, for example, am not an expert on cybersecurity. And while I could probably get ChatGPT or Claude 2 or Bard or something to write an acceptable overview of what cybersecurity is about, I certainly wouldn't even know if it was getting things right or wrong because I don't know enough about that. And so I think your point's well taken there. The other part I think you mentioned that's so critically important is if you're going to use them to create content, and that's a big if, you need to make sure that they're still being reviewed by a human. Some of the facts that come out, you've probably read the same things I have. Sometimes ChatGPT just plain out fibs. No basis in reality whatsoever. And that obviously, if not checked, can make you and your business look like you don't know what you're doing. So I definitely agree with you on that. So good, very cool. From a cybersecurity perspective, and I know you spent about 6 years in that business, do you have any general recommendations for business owners and entrepreneurs of just some basics that maybe we should be thinking about as people that are not really even thinking about cybersecurity? If we're not thinking in terms of how do people take advantage of this data, I think sometimes we just are way too remiss and miss opportunities there. Any advice that you could share with the audience of just some basics in cybersecurity that you've picked up as a marketer that businesses should at least be paying attention to?
Yeah, no, definitely. When I first started in cybersecurity in 2017, the company I was with, provided a lot of training and just basic cybersecurity hygiene, you could call it, things that you should do to keep yourself and your business secure. And really what it comes down to in a lot of ways is, say, password management and not repeating the same password over and over again across all these different systems, or having very complex passwords versus very easy passwords, common sense stuff. But I think these days with password managers, I think it definitely makes it worth one password, Keeper. There's a whole host of different password managers out there that businesses or individuals can get. They're relatively cheap, and it basically just enables you to can create the password for you, or whatever, or you can use your own password. It'll save all these things, and then you don't really have to remember or keep track of all of them that way anymore. So I think that's just one thing, because it's very easy to get hacked essentially as a small business owner, as a business owner, as an individual, whatever. And I think that's a really good way to help prevent that. And so I guess that's one thing. And then the other thing would be being really smart about phishing and smishing, which would be like SMS, phishing attempts, and any kind of, it could be on social media, even someone on LinkedIn reaches out to you, or wherever, and they have that link that they want you to click that's going to do bad stuff to your computer, essentially your network or whatever. And so I think just being smart about, sometimes these are very sinister, where they'll pretend like they're coming from your CEO, they'll pretend like they're coming from a vendor you use or whatever, and just sometimes they'll even, the domain name will look exactly the same as the real one, but they changed one letter or something like that. So yeah, I think that the phishing attempts are like by far the most successful ways that hackers have of getting into businesses' systems. And then obviously the password issue as well is also really important.
Some really good advice. I know just earlier today I was talking to a peer of mine, and he was sharing how he'd gotten a phone call literally this morning from someone who he thought was his son. Wow. And the son had been in an accident. He'd been placed in jail. He needed bail money. He goes, it even sounded like my son. He goes, the call was a little iffy, and he goes, there was some breakup, but it was very believable. I gave the name of an attorney to contact. He contacted the attorney. Somewhere along the line, something tipped him off that something didn't quite seem right. And thankfully, it was before he set the over $10,000 in bail money they were asking for. But come to find out, it was a total sham. He ended up reaching out to his son and found him at work, and the son's, no, that's not me. None of that's happened. And what was interesting to me is when he mentioned the fact that it sounded like his son. I know some of the new technologies that are out there make it easier to deep fake audio and things like that. And I think it's just based on cybersecurity, even in our businesses, it's so important to know that just because Cindy down the hall emailed you that she needed something and Cindy's down the hall doesn't mean that necessarily came from her. If that request, like you mentioned in phishing, just seems a little different than normal.
Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting because I was just watching a video on LinkedIn today that was about what you were just talking about, where they were saying don't post too many videos or pictures or stuff like that of your children online for multiple reasons. But one reason is that people can use those videos and then you basically take the voice and change it into different words and do the deep fakes. And it's just, yeah, there's a whole underbelly of this sort of thing out there that you have to be smart about what you post and what you do. And it's always good to be very careful about those things.
No, I think good advice in general. When it comes to cybersecurity, something most of us probably don't take seriously enough and think about enough. So thank you for sharing on that.
Yeah, sure.
Chris, obviously the name of the podcast is the 91 Day Success Podcast. And one of the things I always love to ask our guests is, hypothetically, it's based on a book that Russell Brunson put out. I don't know if you're familiar with him as a marketer. One of the founders at ClickFunnels. And he took a number of people that had done really well on his software and said, hey, if you had to start over, you had 30 days and $1,000, what would you do? And I thought it was a really interesting concept, except candidly, I didn't think 30 days was enough because it's really hard to do much in 30 days. And so I thought, let's talk 3 months or 91 days. If you would, from your perspective and your experience and expertise, if you said, all right, tomorrow you've got to start a new gig, it's up to you. You've got your house, you've got your food, you've got your car, you've got your knowledge, but all you've got is $1,000 and you need to come up with a business idea and try to figure out how to grow that into something over 91 days. What might you do? What things, based on your experience, might you do to try to build that business up and get it sustainable in the first 91 days? Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's a very interesting concept. I agree. And I think a lot of this the answer would depend on whether the business is B2B or B2C. Since I'm much more familiar with B2B, I'm doing B2C with the book marketing, but again, that's its own thing. But I'll answer it as B2B. And I think what I would do with that $1,000 would be, I would pretty much keep it in the bank for most of the time and really focus, as I said earlier, get on LinkedIn. If you have time is money. So if you have the time to do this every day, spend at least half an hour every day crafting really interesting LinkedIn posts, using videos, etc. And again, it has to do with that unique point of view. It's all hypothetical, but whatever product it was or industry or audience or stuff like that, finding things that would be interesting to them and that there would, again, be this unique point of view that with non-obvious things that it would really help them and looking to serve them too. It's more about serving the audience and serving the customer than it is about just making money, obviously. So that's how it would start in the beginning, say 30 days of that. Obviously keep it going for the long haul, but then I would also consider starting a podcast as well, actually. So by interviewing ideal customers. So let's say you have a list of 10 target accounts that you really think would be great to be great fits, really would you do well to become customers of yours, seek them out, find out exactly who would be interesting from that company, ask them to appear on your podcast, interview them, do all of those sorts of things and get that going. And there may be some expenses for subscriptions, relatively low cost, things of that nature. And then I would also say by the end of the time, and maybe earlier, it would be valuable to, and I think I alluded to this earlier, but, perhaps start a regular weekly or biweekly or something like that virtual event online. And it could be on Zoom, it could be LinkedIn Lives or whatever, but just a way to build a community around your audience, around you and your product and your offering and your point of view and your way of doing things. And then you could record these, you could put them on the podcast, you could put it on YouTube, you could put it on snippets of it on LinkedIn, snippets of it on Facebook or wherever you think your audience would be most interested in it, TikTok even. So, and any of those sorts of things. So I guess I'm getting at is like, I'm building it based on the point of view and the expertise leading with those things. And then using clever posts, videos, just getting an audience and building a brand that way. And I think this definitely takes more than 91 days to really solidify, but I think you'd be off to a good start after 7 weeks.
I think that's great advice. And thank you. I really appreciate your insight on that. And you're absolutely right. I know, especially when it comes to content creation, that is not a switch that just comes on immediately. It's a process. But I love what you said about serving people and providing value to them and then building that presence online that, again, in your area that you're known for. I think that's very valuable. And I agree, doesn't have to cost a lot of money either along the way. I was speaking with someone just the other day and they made a comment about how their business isn't yet at a point where they can afford a lot of advertising and all that. And I said, well, one thing you can do though is we've all got a smartphone. Grab that smartphone and start answering questions that you get asked. And one of the things you mentioned that I love that I have not really thought of is, a virtual event, going ahead and scheduling maybe a time every week that you go live for an Ask Me Anything session, or doing almost a mini mastermind where you're training on something for a period of time and then you open it up for Q&A after that, almost a mini webinar type model. I love that idea. I think what a great way not only to gain experience, but to grow a following as you do that consistently and on a regular basis.
Exactly. Well, yeah, that's great.
Chris, I want to thank you for your time today. I know you got a lot going on and I really appreciate you joining us. We're going to share all the information about how to get in touch with your book if people are interested in buying that series. And I know with the new book coming out in another month, it'd be a great time to get those first two under your belt, then buy the third one when it comes out. And excited to hear about the other series as well when that's launched. And then we'll share some information on Sphere, make sure that's available. If somebody's driving down the road right now and listening to this, they go, wow, I really want to talk to Chris. Any recommendation of the best way? Is it headed to your website? Is it your LinkedIn profile? What's the best way for somebody that wants to reach out and touch base with you to do that, Chris?
Yeah, someone could just search on LinkedIn for Chris Spellman, and then also spellmanbooks.com if they're interested in the series.
Fantastic. Awesome. Again, thank you so much for your time, Chris. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you. If you've been on the podcast and listening to us through the end, we're so grateful for your attention, and we hope we've added a ton of value to your day. So with that, we'll see you on the next episode, everyone. Make it a great day.